everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of our PMCC podcast, The Future of Project Management.
Today, we have a very special guest with us from our very own PMCC team, Dr. Vahid. He is a project management, control and planning professional with excellent experience in mega infrastructure projects across multiple countries. He holds a PhD in management and is also a certified PMP project manager.
Today, we will be going over requirements management. We'll be talking about what it is, what requirement management is, the typical challenges that you might encounter in requirements management, and then some best practices for requirements management. So if that's something that will benefit you, please watch the whole episode. Hi, Dr. Vahid. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are our in-house requirements management professional. So I'd just like to ask you first, from someone who doesn't know what requirements management is, can you share with me what is requirement management and what does your job entail day to day doing for requirements management in the project?
Yes, sure. Actually, requirement management is about providing frameworks, a system and processes to ensure that the requirement meets contractual requirement of the project specification. As a requirement manager, I usually manage and coordinate requirements, activities, and then we manage compliance traceabilities to ensure that the design solution can meet all design requirements, manage databases, the requirements to be recorded and traced and consistent. And also we lead compliance traceability metrics and the linkage for the document submission and coordinate with relevant parties to comply with providing testing and V&V evidences. These are the typical activities that a requirement manager usually has to do within a project.
My next question would be, from these responsibilities that you have, are there any challenges that you might encounter?
That's a good question. That's correct. Actually, as a requirement manager, usually the challenge that we have within a project is we're recording the evidence in each project phases, because it's very important to ensure that the compliance to a specific requirement are fully demonstrate evidence through the linkage in the requirement management processes. And the main challenge, as I mentioned before, is recording the evidences at each project phase.
So you said that the typical challenge would be to record the evidence, right? So could you elaborate on that? What makes it difficult to record the evidence?
At the initial stage of the project, requirements will be reviewed by the engineering department together with the project managers. And then it's very important that the responsible engineers for the scope will review the requirement and provide input for the compliance and the risks of the requirement that are identified in their areas of the responsibilities within the agreed time framework. And also, any risk recognized will be commented on this stage and further captured by risk management process. After that, for verification method for each requirement, it has to be determined as early as possible through the project by the team. So the most important, as I've mentioned before, is to determine and also record evidences. It can be for the engineering phase, for the testing and commissioning, or for system assurance or any project phase. We need to clearly identify and demonstrate with the linkage.
So my next question is, why is requirements management important? So the reason why I'm asking is because I'm trying to understand. I get the function of requirements management, but at the same time, I also feel like not every project will have requirements management.
You are right to some extent, because it depends on project size and also requirement. That is it contractually required or not? Usually when the project size is getting bigger, we require to have the proper requirement management process and system within a project. We have to know that requirement management can give edge to organization in terms of reducing budget issues and also increase business value. Because the requirement management, we will describe the processes that will define the approach, activity, and also process and tools and control methods to be used for capturing evidences and managing the project requirement traceability. We have to know in today's changing project, it's quite necessary to track changes. And if the requirement management processes are not conducted properly and completely in a project in each stage, and it doesn't happen automatically, within a project change, the requirement, the impact wouldn't be shown properly on the design or on other contractual requirement of the project.
What are some tools that you use?
Actually, as you mentioned, some project we never use requirement management. And depends on the project size and the requirement, then we apply requirement management processes. For the tools that you have mentioned, we have to know initially the task of managing requirement was done manually in the form of requirement analysis and requirement prioritizing and requirement review and documentation. If the project size get a little bit bigger, we usually use Microsoft Excel, which traditionally was used to handle project requirement. But we know that Microsoft Excel, with handling project requirement, we have limited access in visualization or traceability. And there are some other softwares which I can mention, the two popular and famous one. We can say IBM Rational Doors and Comply Pro. These two softwares, I see that in mega projects, there are many companies using these two softwares, which are IBM Rational Doors and Comply Pro.
Are there best practices that you implement for requirements management?
That's a good question. Actually, we at PMCC, we try to divide the requirement management into 4 sub-processes, which is as our best practice. But it can be customized within the project scope and the project requirement. But usually we can divide it into 4 phases. First of all, requirement identifications, that at the beginning, the employer has to define the input relevant contract requirement, that what are the contractual requirement for the project, which is usually by an employer. And then after that, for system requirement specification, and contractor usually has to define the system requirement and link to contract requirement. And then after that, the third phase in the best practices, we have to know about the verification evidence, how we demonstrate design compliance to system requirement. And at the end, test program and validation to demonstrate verification, test completion, and at the end, acceptance. These 4 sub-processes can be the best practice for implementing requirement management in a project.
And then my last question is, how can artificial intelligence help requirements management, or do you see artificial intelligence coming in and facilitate requirements management at all? Yeah, what's your view on that?
Yeah, definitely. New technologies are highly impacting requirement management, and the projects are managed differently these days. As you mentioned, AI, Industry 4.0, blockchain, digital twin, and emerging technologies are the potential to impact requirement management. We know the heart of the requirement management is coming back to traceability and transparency. These 2 gaps are the potential that can be filled by AI and especially blockchain. Blockchain recently we can see is helping different industries, different projects with these two attributes, traceability and transparency. So we can say in next few years, we can see that changes to the way that we are managing requirement in a project, and AI and blockchain definitely will emerge the current practices.
Thank you, Vahid. To wrap this up, we'd just like to share with you guys that PMCC does requirements management for clients, not only in our Southeast Asian region, but also across the globe. So if you're interested in our services, or if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please get in touch with us. You can find our website in the description, www.pmcc-corporation.com, and we will get back to you very soon. And for our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. Remember to subscribe for more episodes in the future.